Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into your sources to extract the absolute best knowledge and insight. It's your personal shortcut to being truly well-informed, minus all that information overload.
And we're here to sort of guide you through that material, highlighting what's really important and exploring why it matters, for you.
Today, we're tackling a really practical but utterly critical piece of the puzzle in patent prosecution. We're continuing our series exploring the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPP, and specifically diving into Chapter 700. That's the one all about the examination of applications.
That's right, Chapter 700. It basically lays out the fundamental procedures the USPTO follows when examining a patent application. It's kind of the rule book for that back and forth between the examiner and, well, you, the applicant.
And our specific deep dive today is into MPP Section 710, period for reply. Now, if you're involved in getting a patent application approved, understanding exactly how much time you have to respond to the USPTO, it's absolutely non-negotiable. Mess this up, and, well, the consequences can be pretty severe.
Absolutely. These deadlines, they're really the backbone of keeping an application alive and moving forward. Navigating them correctly is just paramount to protecting your rights.
So over the next little bit, we're going to unpack the key components of this section. This is all based on the source material you've shared. We'll look at the standard timelines, the different kinds of deadlines, how you can potentially get more time, and crucially, what's at stake if you miss the mark.
And before we jump in, we also want to give a big thank you to Mike Shepard. He's the creative director who put together this entire audio series. His work really helps make these deep dives possible.
Yeah, definitely. And just a quick but really vital heads up, this deep dive, it's based on a summary of the MPP that was generated using AI tools. So while we're extracting key points, it might contain errors or omissions. Think of this as a high-level overview. For general understanding, it's not legal advice.
Right.
Always consult the official MPP itself or a qualified patent practitioner for that authoritative guidance.
Exactly. With that essential context in mind, let's really dig into MPEP Section 710.
All right, let's dive into the core of this section then. At its heart, MPEP Section 710 defines the time limits the USPTO gives applicants to respond to those official communications. We mentioned things like rejections or objections issued in an office action.
Precisely. When the examiner sends you an office action, it's essentially saying, okay, here are our findings, here are the issues, and it requires a formal response within a specific window of time. You have to get back to them.
So is there like a standard amount of time you typically get? A default?
Well, the source material indicates that the default period for a reply is usually set at 3 months.
Okay, 3 months. That sounds like a pretty common starting point. Is that deadline always clearly printed on the office action itself, like right there?
Typically, yes, it should be. The specific deadline can shift, based on the type of action or the procedural status. But the section also accounts for situations where maybe the office action doesn't explicitly state a deadline. In those cases, you automatically fall back to that default 3-month period that's established by the rules.
Got it. So 3 months is the baseline, unless it says otherwise. Now, you mentioned severe consequences earlier. Why is hitting this deadline so incredibly important? What happens if you miss it?
This is perhaps the most critical takeaway, really. Filing your reply on time is absolutely essential to prevent the application from going abandoned.
Abandoned. Okay.
Yeah. If the required response isn't submitted before the period for reply expires, the application will likely be considered abandoned by the USPTO. It just stops.
And that's generally not something you want to happen, I imagine. Now, the source material highlights a key distinction here. It seems pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
Statutory periods versus non-statutory periods. What's the difference, and why does it matter?
This is crucial, yeah. And it speaks to where the authority for the deadline actually comes from. So statutory periods are mandated directly by federal law. Specifically, that's 35 U.S.C. 133.
Okay, Section 133.
Right, that's part of the U.S. patent law itself. And because they're based on statute, these periods are inflexible. They can never, ever be extended beyond a total of 6 months from the mailing date.
6 months maximum, set in stone by the law.
Yeah.
Got it. What about the non-statutory periods then?
So non-statutory periods, those are established by the office, by the USPTO, through their regulations, like the ones you find in the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR.
Right.
And a key difference here is that these periods can sometimes be extended, but usually only if you specifically request the extension and pay the required fees. That's often under rules like 37 CFR 1.136.
Right, 1.136. I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's a common one. It's a specific rule within Title 37 governing patents and trademarks.
Ah, okay. So extensions are generally possible for those non-statutory deadlines, or maybe for adding time within a larger statutory window. Is that right?
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. The source material gives a really good example with responding to a final office action. The underlying statute, that 35 U.S.C. 133 we mentioned, it gives you a total statutory period of 6 months to reply. Full stop. However, the office often sets a shorter time period for reply within that 6 months, like, say, 3 months.
Right, the shortened period.
Exactly. This initial shorter period is often called a shortened statutory period. Now, if you need more than those initial 3 months, you can get extensions, usually under that Rule 37 CFR 1.136a. But, and this is key, you have to pay fees for each month of extension you take. And you can only extend up to that total statutory maximum of 6 months from the original mailing day of the action. You can't go past 6 months no matter what.
Okay, that really clarifies how that shortened period works inside the bigger statutory one. Makes sense. Now, probably the most practical question someone has, how do you actually calculate your deadline? When does the clock start ticking? Is it when you, like, open your mailbox and find the office action?
Yeah, this is where people can definitely get tripped up, and the source is very, very clear on this. The starting date for the reply period is the mailing date of the office action.
The mailing date.
The mailing date. Not the date you receive it, not the date you happen to read it, but the date it's officially stamped as mailed by the USPTO.
Wow, okay. That is a critical distinction. So if an office action is mailed, say, on the 5th of the month, but it takes a week and doesn't reach your office until the 12th, your deadline calculation starts way back on the 5th.
Exactly. That's a huge point for docketing and tracking.
Absolutely.
Relying on the receipt date is, well, it's a common mistake, and it can be a very costly one. The date stamp on the communication itself is what matters.
Okay, crystal clear. And just to circle back quickly to extensions, you mentioned 37 CFR 1.136. What else does the source say about getting more time? Anything else there?
Well, the source really highlights that extensions under rules like 1.136 typically involves submitting a formal request for the extension and paying those associated fees we talked about.
Right, the fees again.
Yeah. It just reinforces that this rule, 1.136, is how you access that remaining time within the statutory 6-month window when you're dealing with those shortened statutory periods. It's particularly relevant, as we said, for final office actions.
Okay. So summing up the calculation part then. First, pinpoint the mailing date on the action. Then identify the set reply period, remembering the default is 3 months if nothing else is stated. Then figure out if it's a pure non-statutory period or one of those shortened statutory periods within the 6-month max. And finally, know that getting more time, those extensions beyond the initial set period, usually require petitions and fees, and they have hard limits.
That's a very concise summary of the key factors you need to track.
Okay, let's try and make this really concrete. Let's use the example provided in the source material. Suppose an office action is mailed on June 1st.
Okay, June 1st mailing date.
And let's say it sets a 3-month shortened statutory period for reply.
All right, so based on everything we've just discussed, the mailing date is June 1st. That's our starting point. The initial period given for the reply is 3 months from that date.
So doing the math, the reply is initially due by September 1st. Is that right?
That is correct. To meet that initial deadline, avoid needing extensions, avoid paying extra fees, your complete response must be filed with the USPTO on or before September 1st.
Okay, but we know there's that underlying full statutory period of 6 months kind of lurking in the background. What happens if you can't get your reply finished and filed by September 1st? What are the options?
This is exactly where that extension mechanism kicks in, along with, you guessed it, the fees.
Right.
So if you manage to file your reply after September 1st, but before December 1st, because that's the full 6-month mark from the original June 1st mailing date, it can still be accepted.
Okay, good.
But, and this is the big but, it must be accompanied by the appropriate fee for the extension of time you actually took. If you file in October, you pay for 1 month. File in November, you pay for 2 months, potentially.
Ah, okay. So the 3 months is kind of the no extra cost deadline, the target.
Yeah.
But you essentially have this 6-month safety net if you're willing and able to pay for each month you dip into that extra time.
Exactly. But that 6-month statutory limit, December 1st in our example, that is firm. Filing after December 1st, well, that generally means the application is held abandoned.
Abandoned.
Yep. And while, sure, there are procedures to try and revive an abandoned application, they're totally separate, often complex, costly, and frankly, not always successful. You don't want to go there if you can avoid it.
No, definitely not. This really brings home how critical these seemingly dry procedural details actually are. So for you, the listener, whether you're an inventor, maybe a paralegal managing deadlines, or a patent practitioner, what does understanding MPPP Section 710 truly mean for your world? Why should you care this much?
Well, it means the difference between a smoothly progressing application and one that might be dead in the water, or at least facing costly revival. Understanding these periods allows for strategic planning. It means knowing exactly when responses are due, anticipating when you might need an extension, and budgeting for those potential costs. It's really about proactive management of your client's patent rights. It transforms a simple deadline from just a date on the calendar into a key element of your overall prosecution strategy.
It really sounds like having robust docketing systems, like absolutely double-checking those mailing dates the moment an action comes in, and just having a crystal clear understanding of the statutory maximums and the extension rules. It's absolutely paramount.
Indispensable. Really, it's the foundation of effectively and efficiently moving an application through the examination process. You just have to get this part right.
You know, this whole deep dive into the reply period, it really highlights how much can hinge on something as specific as calculating time correctly from a particular point like that mailing date, rather than something maybe more intuitive like the date you actually received it.
Indeed, it does. And it raises an important question, I think, for anyone interacting with the patent system. In a process as complex and, frankly, as vital as patent examination, which is ultimately designed to protect and promote innovation, how can the system itself, and how can those of us navigating it, ensure that these critical procedural deadlines, like counting from a mailing date, are never the reason an invention doesn't get protected? How do we make sure that simple procedural trip-ups don't derail innovation?
That is a great thought to end on. That wraps up our deep dive into MP Section 710, period for reply. We really hope this clarified the crucial distinctions and the calculations involved.
Yeah, knowing those standard periods, the statutory maximums, the absolute significance of the mailing date, and how extensions function, it's all vital for successful patent prosecution.
A big thank you once more to Mike Shepard for organizing this entire series. And just one last reminder, this summary came from AI Tools. It's for general information only, definitely not legal advice. Always consult the official MPP or a qualified professional.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of a really key part of the patent examination process. Hope it was helpful.
Join us next time for another deep dive into a new stack of sources.